everyone. Welcome to KDVG Studio. And I don't know if you can tell, maybe you can. I'm a bit excited about today's topic because it does delve into some of my more recent work history to a certain extent. Today, Katie and I are going to talk a bit about voting. We're going to talk about it in general. We want to get into some things about what resources you can have to look up information more cohesively or collectively regarding voting. And we definitely want to talk about voting in primaries.
Mm.
So just before we started recording, Katie's going to get to hear this twice, but I was talking to her a bit about the fact that I really started learning about the US actual voting process and system more so after I'd already been living in New York City for 15 years. So 2015, because Katie and I were actually apartment mates for part of our time in Washington State. And I was telling her when we were in Washington State, I don't know about her, but I wasn't registered in a party. I've never been a big party person, possibly because, like a lot of Americans, I don't necessarily see the parties as putting the people first so much as their power first. And so I was just like a bit more about who's running, and I will go and vote in that. I don't even know if I might have voted in one primary in Washington State, but there you didn't have to be registered for the party to vote in the primary. You went on the day of the election because at the time it was all in person for the most part. You had to have a medical reason to vote remotely. You went on the day of the election and you said, I want to vote in the Republican primary, or I want to vote in the Democratic primary, or I want to vote in the Green primary, whatever it was. Though Dem and Republican were the major. And they gave you the ballot for whichever party you designated. You were marked off as having voted, and you could only vote in one primary. So you couldn't say, hey, I want to vote in both. You had to vote in one.
Mm.
Great. Wonderful. When I moved to New York, I followed a similar process in that I was what you would call unaffiliated. I wasn't registered in any party in New York State. Again, wasn't a great lover of the parties, was more interested, if in anything, in the candidates and what they stood for. And what I came to discover as I started my journey to supporting Bernie Sanders in the 2016 presidential election was that in New York State, if I wanted to vote in the Democratic primary when was it going to be? It was going to be at that time in September of 2016. I had to register in the party by the end of, I think, by the week of September. It was 365 days before.
Oh, wow.
If I wanted to be able to, and I wasn't registered in a party. So I remember I just barely made the deadline.
Wow.
I went to a meeting. They mentioned the fact that you had to be registered. I went and got the form and I mailed it in, which is why I wasn't quite sure I was going to make the deadline because I mailed it. Though I could have walked to the Board of Elections in Queens, walking distance from my apartment, but I mailed it in. This is how, just talking a little bit about how my process came to being a bit more involved in this process. But because in New York State, the first guy I ever petitioned with, his dad was a diehard Republican, diehard in terms of how he talked, in terms of what he believed. Lived in New York his whole life. He was a registered Democrat in New York. Why? Because in New York City, 80 to 90% of the time, whoever wins the Democratic primary wins the general election. It's a predominantly Democratic city, and so many people who vote in the general election use the parties as their proxy. And so they just vote party line. They don't necessarily even know who the candidate is that they're voting for. They just vote for the party that they believe best aligns with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
No shade to that. That's just what happens. But that's why his dad voted in the Democratic primary, because that way he felt his vote counted. And he could steer the Democratic Party to what I would perceive as a more conservative bent. He's the same age as we are. So, by the time you hit the 70s, the Republicans are going more conservative and the Democrats are becoming what might be termed more liberal, so to speak. So, primaries. We have a number of primaries coming up. There's some primaries that have already passed. There's a lot of primaries that
Yep.
are coming up.
Yep.
And we want to encourage you to vote in the primary, to check your state and see, are you registered? Do you have to be registered? If you're in a state that you don't have to be registered for, make the time to go vote in the primary. We know it's one more ask, but New York City is not the only place in this country where whoever wins a primary may be who ends up winning the general election. So I know this is my, I was going to say my happy place. It's not my happy place, but it's an area that I'm passionate about. But I know that Katie did some research and because she was like, oh, primary? I vote in the general.
I was like, I ignore primary because I'm also not party affiliated. So I don't pay any attention to primaries. But I did not realize some places, some states, you can vote. Um, very interesting, actually.
Do you know
Um,
if you're in Virginia, right? You're registered
yes,
in
I
Virginia.
am in
Do you
Virginia.
know
Yep.
if Virginia is one of those states?
I do not know,
Okay.
but I can find out because I found a resource for people who don't know about voting. It's like everything from A to Z. So the first thing I did when we decided to do this topic was I found all the elections that are coming up this year up to the general election. And it's on AP. Associated Press has a very nice layout with all the states. So I guess today there's a bunch happening, and on the 9th, the 16th, 23rd. So there's a whole group of them and explains what each of them are. And then I found this website called Vote 411. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
Mhm,
Yes, you have heard of that one. So that was launched by the League of Women Voters.
mhm.
And I just did a really quick little Google search on them and very interesting as well. So they started Valentine's Day 1920 by
When women first had
suffragettes. Suffragettes. They formed this organization, NGO, nonprofit, and they launched this League of Women Voters, Vote 411. So you can just put in your address and then it'll tell you everything that you need to know, all the way from figuring out if you're even registered, how to register, where to vote, gives you a little map. Um, so I thought that was a very nice little, if you need help, which I think I do, it just helps me each time I need to vote to just go back to the basics. The very least, I know I'm registered to vote. I mean, I know that much, but other than that, I like to just double check everything before so I know what's going on.
and I'll tell you, I need that help right now too. I moved
Mm,
officially to Connecticut as of 2023. I was coming back and forth, but as of 2023, I'm a Connecticut resident, and if you ask me even to this day about New York, I might know a little bit more, just
mm,
because I'm kind of plugged into the people who are either working or volunteering or supporting
hmm
certain candidates. Here in Connecticut, I'm not as tapped in. So my social media feeds don't necessarily show as much about who's running, what they stand for. I don't know if maybe Connecticut just gets overshadowed by New York in terms of,
mm,
like do the candidates just not do social media ads? Not sure. Again, I have not
mm.
worked a campaign in Connecticut. I volunteered a little bit, but that's about it.
Oh, did you?
So just, somebody who was running for mayor a couple of years ago. I,
Oh,
like, spoke at a fundraiser that my sister did. I marched with
oh,
them
wow.
in, like, the Puerto Rican Day Parade. That's the extent. It wasn't and I sat
Mm,
down with his campaign manager and gave advice
oh,
on a volunteer
nice.
basis. So, that's all I did. I wasn't an active politico I wasn't even an active
You're
consultant.
such a political animal. It's
But
good.
I also look to these aggregator sites for information,
Mm,
and there's a few more. So Vote 411 is excellent. It is an excellent site. If you don't remember any others, remember that one. Again, started by women.
yes, exactly.
But there are other sites. So there's
Mhm.
It is a
Mhm.
US government site for voter registration and state voting information. And Vote.org is a nonpartisan site for registration checks, absentee ballots, and election reminders. Something to know about all of these, and Vote 411, just so you know, it's the numbers 411.
Yes.
Because sometimes when you hear it, you might think it's the word for, and it's not. Is Katie already described what it is, but it's nonpartisan as well.
Mm.
I Will Vote is one I have not heard as much about, but it
Oh.
is a voter information site with state specific election details and a voter hotline. So the other thing to know is
Ah.
that some people experience where they get told either, hey, you're not registered or you're at
Mm.
the wrong polling site. And so they're
Mhm.
being told they can't vote. I can speak for New York. In New York, if you were told you were at the wrong voting site and you could not, like, you're in your 2 hours, there's no way you're going to make it back, you need to use it.
Mm.
You could do what was sometimes called a provisional ballot, which meant that they wrote your information on the outside. Like, they don't see your vote, but they wrote your information on the outside. They looked it up later and then
Mhm.
assigned you to like they took that ballot and assigned it to the correct polling location. Or if you were just being told you were not registered and you're like, no, I am registered, there were often, because people were looking all this stuff up online, and on
Mhm.
both primary days, but especially general election days, things are overloaded. So
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
you would get a negative about being registered when you looked it up the day before and there was a positive.
Oh.
So now, there's also some scandals that happened that I'm not gonna get into, but there were people who were brought up on charges for having purged people who technically should not have been purged from the voter rolls. So, look yourself up beforehand. The
Yep.
other thing is almost every single state has a voting website. So even if you're just looking,
Mm.
you're like, I don't wanna go through others, I just wanna know what my state has, I would say that I'd be shocked if it's possible, but I still would be shocked if there's a state out there that doesn't have at least a bare bones website giving you the information about registration and where you vote.
Mhm.
They may
Yep.
not provide everything else, like who all the candidates are or what your ballot looks like, but they normally at least have, are you registered?
Mhm.
And that's where a lot of places like Vote 411 or
Mhm.
Vote.org and even Vote.gov are pulling their information from, is from
Mm.
sites.
Right.
One that I am familiar with that I actually really like, which is a bit more for the people who, and I strongly encourage people to be this way, who want to do a little bit more research on who's
Mhm.
voting. I mean,
Oh, that would be helpful. Yeah.
who's running in the races that you
Yeah.
like,
Because
like
sometimes the
the
names are just like, I don't know who these people are.
yeah,
I'd
it's a
like to
laundry list
know
of names and you don't know anything
something.
about them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you could go and look up each one of them individually, or you could go to a site like Ballotpedia. So ballot and then pedia.
Oh.
And it is an election and candidate encyclopedia useful for researching ballot measures and races. And that's where you can go, okay, you win and they told you you're in this congressional district, you're in this
Mhm.
state assembly district, you're in this state, whatever. They told you what you are.
Mhm.
They might have even said, here are the names of the people who are on the ballot. And you're like, I know nothing about these people.
Yeah.
Ballotpedia is one of the places you can go to see sort of where they've pulled the information together. Now,
Mhm.
candidates can submit a Ballotpedia information form. Not all of them do. So
Mm.
Ballotpedia does try and like link to their website or to articles about them. It tries to pull in information so that you can actually read a bit
Oh,
about them.
okay. That's great.
And so it is one of the sites for those who are looking for information
Hmm.
to go to. Here's one of the areas where it's a little iffy on is, again, not all states do this, but in New York State, you get to vote on judges. I found Ballotpedia very light, if anything, on who the judges are. Now, the
Mm.
judges are a racket in New York State. That's another show because I promised Katie we were going to keep this tight. But
Yes.
I say this to just say that you may still have to do some of your own research
Mm.
or try or see if you can tap into people that you trust who maybe know a little bit more.
Yeah.
just because it's not always readily available out there.
Mm.
And when I say about people you trust, I used to literally do whether it was sticky notes or a text message, and I had a good there were years it was like 20, 25 people. There's been other times it's been 5 who are like, "Who am I voting for?" And I would be like, "Okay." And these are folks who are like, I cannot. This stuff drives me
Yeah.
crazy. I
Yeah.
trust
Yeah.
you. Please tell me who I should vote for." I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna tell you who I would vote for in
Yeah.
this situation." But they at least know I mean, these are folks who know me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like
Exactly.
I ran into them on the street and they're like, "Please tell me who to vote for." I'm like, "I'll tell you, but I could be anyone to you." Like, my sister has often asked me. I just sent her there's a organization that I supported its founding in Central Queens. They put out information on who they're voting for, and so I just sent her the sample ballot with their
Okay.
highlighted info. Just because 'cause I'm not there, so I'm not as in the know, not as aware of all of the candidates.
So does
So
the Ballotpedia is not just candidates, does it have the actual so here's an example. So in Virginia, in April, we had a special vote situation on redistricting. And I was like, I have to vote. But I didn't really know anything about it because I was rushing. And so I Googled it when I
mhm.
got into be now, to my credit, it was before I gave my ID in so they could check. So I didn't hold up a line, but you know, I didn't know really what it was about, but I knew I needed to vote. So does it have that kind of
Yeah,
information
it's a
like,
that would
yeah,
be considered a ballot measure. So
ballot
ballot
measure? Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
So Ballotopedia will most often have major ballot measures. Now,
Okay.
if you're talking about your local town having a vote, they might not have that, but statewide measures, I'd be surprised if they didn't have it. So something like that,
Okay.
I I bet you could still go look up what they had or what they had compiled on it. Because that's the thing about Ballotopedia is they have stuff on on all parties, not just
Mhm.
the majors. They compile information that is out there on things like the ballot measures. They at least from what I've seen, they're normally not trying to actively steer people one way or another. They're
Mhm.
looking to provide the info, which is one of the reasons that I like them. Now,
Yeah.
again, I tend to lean pretty liberal, I guess would be the description. So if you talk to a more conservative person, they might have a different perspective on Ballotopedia. I don't know. I haven't
Mm.
discussed it with others in that way, other than
Yeah.
other fairly liberal folks. But my sense of it is like I would love them to do a little bit more about like why this is the better, and they don't. They give you here's what's being said.
You know what I would like? I would like a website that I could log in, create an account, and then it'll just send me nearer times, a reminder, go vote. This is what it's about. So I don't have to go chase the information, which I know sounds very lazy, but I feel
Actually,
like I'm not the only
Ballotopedia
person.
does that.
Oh, do
You
they?
can sign up for reminders, and I think Vote 411 does too.
Okay, I'm going to do
I
that.
think they're both it's an option you have to opt into,
Yeah,
but they will
I'm going to do
both
that.
send when you've given them your address, they will send you information as the election is coming up about needing to
Okay,
go vote.
great. Thank you. I'm going to do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah. So, yeah, voting in primaries is important, voting for ballot measures is important, but to
Mm.
Katie's earlier point, we don't always make the time. I say make the time, but sometimes people's lives are so hectic as it is. One of the other things I was talking to Katie about it, and we've discussed this as well, is that Americans have some of the least amount of leisure time in the world, you know? So,
Mm.
like, whatever they have, if the political conversation is maybe causing agita, it might not be where they want to go spend time to look up information, to learn about candidates.
Are you allowed to take time off work to vote? Is that a legitimate is there like
So
a law?
I don't I'd have to look up the other states. I know in New York State,
Mm.
your employer was required to give you 2 hours to go and vote.
Oh, okay. By
Here's
state. Yeah.
I think it's by state, and here's the thing about it in New York, especially New York City, is a lot of people have long commutes. An hour
Mm.
commute is the norm. So, what I would normally recommend to people is to go vote before you go to work and just take your 2 hours at the front end, but not all employers will allow you to
Mm.
do that. Because once you're at work, it's harder to get out.
Yeah, true.
And the other thing about it is for people working sort of a normal 9 to 5, the the polling stations opened at 6 a.m. So, again, it depends. If there's a super long line, your 2 hours
Yeah.
could be eaten up.
Yep.
So, I know that there were some attempts to change things. I know there have been it hasn't gained much traction, but there have been conversations in differing times about why isn't election day a holiday?
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. They should just give you the whole day so you have a chance to, you know,
But
get
if
to where
you
you're
don't
supposed to go.
get vacation, a lot of people are like, "Chuck voting. I'm taking the day off. I'm sleeping in. I'm gonna take another day, and I'm gonna have a 4-day weekend. You know, chuck it." And so,
Yes, but I don't think we should be companies shouldn't be assuming the worst of their employees. I mean,
oh no, no, it's
they
not
hired them.
when I'm talking about it. Companies will say you can take a PTO day. You can always
Yeah,
take
but
a P.
that eats into your vacation. I
Mhm.
think there should be a specific voting
And that's what people have been
group.
talking about, is having it be a
Yes.
federal holiday.
Yeah.
That voting should be a federal holiday. But even if that were passed, it would most likely be for the general election
Oh,
as
yes,
opposed to
that's
the
true.
primary.
That's why they should have like a little like 5 days during the year so you can go do all your little voting.
Yeah,
I
or
suggest
simplify
it.
our voting process. Do you know the number of Gen Zers I've talked to asking, "Can I vote on my phone?"
I know. Also, why can't we do that?
And
I agree
I
with that.
a lot of the people who poo-poo the idea of doing that are like, "Oh, it's too easy for it to get hacked." I'm like, "People have been hacking voting since they used balls and paper."
Also, we're doing banking online. Like our credit cards are all on the
We
phone
do
and
medical
our
online.
watches, for God's sakes. Yeah, come on.
We do medical online. It's just because most of the so for people in power, the more people who go to vote, the more likelihood it is
More
that they will no
danger.
longer be in power. So, even those who might start out going, "We need to expand the voting pool," by the time they get in there, it is no longer a top priority.
Mm,
And when you're trying to
yeah,
get things like
yeah,
universal health care, maternity, paternity leave, like, close the donut hole gap in Medicare, whatever. When you're
yeah.
focused on, like, saving Social Security because they keep threatening it, the idea of the fact that we need to make voting easier, though they might still think it's important and it's something that we should do, it ends up no longer being a top priority because
Also, it's the system that got them in. So why fiddle around with it?
yeah, I think we may see a change if and when we get younger electeds.
Mm,
So the more, and by younger electeds, I'm talking about when we have a majority of like millennial, Gen Z, Gen
mhm,
Alpha in there,
mhm.
which we may or
Yeah.
may not get to see, is when we're more likely to see voting go to a system that can be done online. Because I've asked the
Mm.
same question since I started getting more actively involved in 2015. Because even then, I did my banking online. I was
Mhm,
starting to do medical, and as of the COVID, I do a lot of medical stuff online.
mhm.
I'm like, if you can secure, and I'm not saying they're always secure, but if you can secure those things and you can put
Yeah,
resources towards securing them,
exactly.
and the amount of money we spend on printing ballots,
Mhm.
on printing informationals, if you took that money and you applied it to securing the vote,
Mhm.
it might not be that difficult. But then there's other people who are like, well, the people with the most money are already running our elections. What
Yes.
happens when it's online?
They lose
And
control.
well, or they control the online systems.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
So I don't have a this is the answer. I do think that even though we're a republic, we vote for our representatives.
Yep.
It's a representative democracy.
Mhm.
If we really want to keep that democracy word, we need to make it more easily accessible for people to vote
Agree.
as we continue to move into our modern era. So there are resources out there to help us understand where to vote as it is right now, where you can find information about the rules and regulations in your state. You can even find out information about your town. And sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're not, but there's often a board of elections. And I say that just because I've had both experiences. Again,
Mm,
New York City is vast,
mhm.
but I've gone into the board of elections and been incredibly helped.
Mm,
I had gone into the board of elections and been incredibly frustrated, like physically. So, for those who maybe wanna take that extra step, there are
mm.
often physical locations that you can go to. It might just be your town hall to find out or find somebody who can provide you with greater input. At least, I mean, they may not be providing you input on who to vote for, but who's running, how the system works, how maybe you can get involved. Because the other thing is because it is a physical process, there are people who work the elections.
Yes,
So it's a
that's right.
great job for
Yep.
especially a college student or even a late high school student who's just looking for something. Because a lot of these are held over the summer, at least the primaries are.
Yes. Yep. That's right.
You could work the election, you could get to know some of the people behind the scenes. It's just an idea to think about until such time as we get to the point. But I don't know, I'd have to look it up, but have you even heard of any other countries that do voting online?
No, I don't think so. I think Malta has to be in person. They just had an election last week, the weekend. Australia
There
is mandatory voting, but I don't think anything's online there.
I loved the and I don't know if you told me this or it was something I looked up, but I loved that because it was mandatory voting and it was a day off, they would do, like, go vote and then, like, have public barbecues? It must have been something I
I
looked
don't
up, but
remember. I don't.
okay. Well, you weren't voting in
It's
Australia, so
possible. Yep.
yeah. But there are very few countries. So, Canada has online voting is used in some municipal elections, but not federal. Switzerland, online voting has been used in some cantons and for some voters, not universally nationwide. United Arab Emirates has used fully digital voting in federal elections. France has online voting has been available for citizens abroad in some elections.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
if you can do it for those abroad, why couldn't you do it for those at
Yeah.
home? Other
100%.
than the other thing I was talking to Katie about is that we're in the US, people are almost like, you don't talk religion, you don't talk money, you don't talk politics. France is a little bit more like, you talk about those things, especially politics. Culturally. Culturally, you establish like, in the US where they ask you, "Oh, what is it you do?" Because that establishes who you are. In France, it's a little bit more like, where do you stand politically? That establishes
Hmm,
who you are.
hmm.
Not entirely, I don't wanna but it is a little bit more. The other thing I was sharing with Katie, which she did not notice, so this may just be my own impression. When we were in France and then later in Switzerland, I was really surprised by the reaction I got because people did ask, "What are you studying?" And essentially, where at Smith we would call it government, it was political science. That's what our majors were. And when I would say that, the reaction from the French speakers was always like, kind of like, wow. Like, I actually had a couple of people say, oh, the really smart people study politics. which I always thought was wild because the reaction in the US was like, "Oh, so you're gonna be a lawyer?" Mm. Like, very dismissive, very not interested. Like, it wasn't
Mm,
something to.
yeah, so I didn't remember any of these reactions in either country, so, but that's not to say I didn't get it because I'm not very good at paying attention, but,
I don't know that Katie cares that much about what I mean, she looks at other people, but I don't know if random folks' reactions to what she is or is not studying would even register. So, I was just interested on the juxtaposition. Like, I
Mm,
think I noticed it because it
yeah,
was so different than anything in the US. Like, they were like, at most of the time, they're like, "Oh, okay." Like, it just wasn't a thing, while the French speakers found it to be something. And I
mm,
think about just like when people talked about Le Sorbonne, people talked about the folks who got their political science degrees from there. It's like one of the
yes,
pre if not the preeminent school in
yep.
in France, and that's what they talked about a lot. I wanna just list one more country, which is Estonia. I understand it's small, but it has full online voting for eligible voters in national and local elections.
I think
So
Estonia is quite cutting edge because Estonia also moved some kind of visa or immigration stuff all online.
mhm.
They're very pro online, I noticed.
So I just wanted one more caveat, sorry. But to your point about Estonia, so practical takeaway is if you mean can I vote from my computer or phone over the internet, the answer is usually no in most countries. Okay. With Estonia being the major exception and a few limited use cases elsewhere. So maybe we all should be looking at Estonia as the case study and
Their
see how.
university also has a very interesting folklore graduate program. I just
Mm.
thought I'd throw that out there for anyone interested in voting and folklore. You're welcome.
If you are interested in voting and folklore, will you please let us know? You can do it as a direct message. You don't have to post it publicly. And I really
Yeah.
want to know if
I can tell you the name of
where
the
there's.
university as well. I'll look it up because I found it randomly last year. And
I
I
just
was
would really.
seriously looking at it just out of, yeah, hello. Yeah.
Yes,
I
but
was having an existential crisis.
she has not been as interested in voting. So I do not consider Katie my nexus point of those two things. If you're talking about something anthropological, cultural, or archaeological, she's your girl. Like.
Yeah. And folklore. I'm happy to
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
folklore under
I
that
think a
umbrella.
folklore is cultural, so yes,
Oh, yes.
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
She is definitely your girl, but voting is, I think, more of a responsibility to her.
You are the professional in this group.
I have been. I have
Mhm.
That's a past tense currently. I'm not saying it never will be again, I'm just saying it is not a current occupation.
Do you have
Yeah.
any last words to impart
The only thing I
on
wanna
voting?
say is don't stop yourself from going, whether it's to the primary or the
Mm,
general, because if you're like, "Hey, I don't know," I would tell you something like 75% of the people walking in there have no idea who they're voting for until they see the ballot.
yeah.
So, nowadays, we carry these, like, super duper computers, kinda a la
Yes, we
Star
do.
Trek. We got our tricorders in our hands.
Yes.
Most places, you can at least look it up while you're standing in line to vote or as you first walk in and they're
I've
verifying,
done that. So, yeah.
and you're getting your ballot.
Yep.
You can at least look up who, and now we've given you a few resources. If you're
Mm,
looking at who do I even wanna vote for, you can look at Ballotpedia. The other thing you can do is see if there are local groups, whether it's an issue. Like I knew a gentleman who was really like he was really for bike lanes. So like he got a lot of his
mm.
information because he actively worked on bike lanes, starting with, like the people that he worked with on bike lanes. I know people who their issues
Oh,
were it was the Writers Alliance. So they were people who were interested in public transport. So they
oh, yeah.
really pulled
Mhm.
together and looked at who were the people that supported public transport. There was a
Mm,
group. that was about animals and animal welfare. That was
Hmm.
their specialty, and so they looked at candidates and looked at, okay, who would we recommend based on
That's a
their
good
stance?
idea. Yeah.
So even if maybe you say politics in general isn't your thing, maybe look at what your specific issue or
Yeah.
concern is and look at what groups support or
Mm.
advocate for that concern and see whether or not they have endorsements or recommendations, or maybe they say, here's what to look for in their platform.
That's a
And
really
that
good
might be,
idea.
yeah, that might be
Yeah.
a shorthand for how you go about figuring out who you vote
Mm.
for beyond just the party. Because look, I've said this, but the people that I worked for weren't, they probably would have been independent if they were in another city. Like because we have a two-party system in the United States, a lot of people slot themselves into whichever party they need to be slotted into in order to have a snowball's chance in hell of getting elected.
Yeah.
It's not always the arbiter or the complete arbiter of where they stand or what their platforms mean. And I think we do better to take a look at the candidate
Mm.
holistically. The other thing I will tell you, for those who are willing to take another step, because it is another step, there
Hmm.
are sites that tell you who has donated money to your candidate. Who was your candidate accepted money from?
That's
Because
important.
that
Yeah.
can be a huge indicator of
Yeah.
where they stand.
Yep.
Because there's a lot of people, um, presidents number 45 and 47 in particular, who have said things. But if you look at about, standing for the little
Hmm.
guy,
Hmm.
but if you look at where their money comes from, it comes from the richest people out there, the
Yeah.
richest corporations, because United is still on the books. And that means that a company like Amazon or Walmart or Meta can donate money to candidates as if they were a person.
Mm.
And so long as that is in place, that means that the people oftentimes don't have as much sway because we are in a late capitalist system. So to wrap up, it doesn't take as long as it might have been in the past. You don't have
Mm.
to go searching through newspaper files. There are sites where you can find the information aggregated already for you. You can look it up as you're walking in to vote, but
Mm.
please take the time to vote. And if physically getting there is difficult, almost all states have an absentee ballot
Oh,
option.
yeah.
There
Yep.
are rules around signing up for it,
Mm.
but it's another thing to look at. I think it
Mm.
may be too late for a lot of the primaries, but in most places, I think there's plenty of time for the general election
Mm.
to
Yep.
sign up to absentee ballot or
Hmm.
to absentee vote. Or if you're trying to make sure your parents can vote and you're not going to be able to physically take them,
Yeah.
maybe you can help them fill out an absentee ballot request and they can have it delivered to them and they can mail their ballot back.
That's what my brother does for my mom.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And I've done it for my mom before. Now she's physically able to go. I just take her on a day that we live in a small New England town. So I just take her on a day that it's likely not to be a
Mm.
long line for voting and kind of late morning before lunch. So the people on their way to work have already voted. The people for lunch haven't come
Mm.
out yet. She's normally okay. So yeah, just make the time to do it because to throw up our hands and just say, it's all screwy anyways, you're abdicating your responsibility. And one of the things I can actually say that my mom had told me numerous times, and she says her mom told her, is that if you haven't voted, you've literally written away your right to complain
Yep.
because you made no
So
effort.
true. So true.
And it's also one of our few citizen responsibilities. You got to pay
Yep.
taxes and you got to vote.
Yep.
At least that's what it should be. So
Yep.
thank you so much for joining us. We are very much looking to keep this short and sweet today. We will have the resources listed as well for you. And again, thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Give us a heart or subscribe.
Go vote.
Go vote.